Welcome, welcome to the Mind Fuck Podcast. welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for taking time out to hang out with me. I am really grateful you're here. My name is Wanu Alishe. Sometimes I do go by Amazing Soul. Welcome. FCK stands for fun, compassion, and kindness. Now, on the Mindfuck podcast, we essentially talk about all the good things about nervous system regulation, how to, build trust between and internal safety between your brain and your body in fun ways. We also talk about the inner child awareness, um, and how to be human again. You know, I think that's like also like the core of what we talk about on the show. And we also have like a mini tradition where I have a list that I titled Reminders to Being Human. And the intention behind reading that list every time before I start the actual show is to remind myself and also in the hopes to remind you on your journey. All right, let's get into it, guys. Reminders to being human. Have fun along the journey. Show yourself compassion. Be kind to others. Being complex and being simple can hold true in the same breath. Stay curious. Hold space for pauses. Hold space for not knowing. Never underestimate the power of silence. Nature has a lot of wisdom. Pay attention. There is power in we than I. If nothing else makes sense, come back to love. Pain is our greatest teacher. And the very last one, never underestimate your ripple of existence. welcome again, my friend. Now let's get into the fun part of the show. All right. Now, today on the podcast, I want to talk to you about something that sounds very soft, almost poetic, the inner child. But I want to talk about it in a way that's very real. I mean, everyday real life, not in a therapy room way, not in a spiritual quote way, but the way it actually shows up in normal human life. Because if you're anything like me, the first time someone mentioned your inner child, I honestly did not know what that meant. Was I supposed to imagine a younger version of myself? Was I supposed to kill something? Was I supposed to talk to myself? Back then, which was like 5 years ago, none of that felt clear to me. And to be honest, it even felt a little strange initially. But something changed for me along my journey when I started noticing something very small. It wasn't not healing, it wasn't the breakthroughs, it was just the micro moment of safety. I mean, tiny moments where my body felt a little less tense. My body felt a little less guarded. My body felt more open. And over time, I started realizing something very interesting on my journey. Those small moments were actually the doorway back to the parts of myself I had not felt in years. I mean, the playful parts, the curious parts, the softer parts, and those are the parts that many people call the inner child. All right. Now, let me start with a very simple scene. Maybe you have experienced something like this on your journey. I mean, you're sitting somewhere quiet, maybe in your car, maybe at home, even maybe early in the morning before your actual day begins. And suddenly, you feel a small wave of emotion. Not overwhelming, just something subtle. And in that moment, maybe your chest tightens slightly, or maybe you feel a strange heaviness in your stomach. And your first instinct might be to do what most human beings do, right? This is what most of us do. We ignore it. We scroll on our phone endlessly. We turn on some music to drown out the noise. We distract ourselves. For me on my journey, I used to do this constantly because sitting with those feelings felt uncomfortable at first. But if I'm being honest, sometimes even felt unsafe. And back then, my body wasn't used to slowing down, especially for me after years of moving fast. For me, that included my military life, the constant structure I had in my life, the constant expectations I had in my life. Your nervous system gets used to functioning in a certain way, right? I mean, fast, alert, always ready. Some people might call it hypervigilance. And when that finally slows down, something very interesting happens, right? Silence begins to appear. And in silence, old emotions sometimes begin to surface, not because something is wrong, no, my friend, but because your body finally has space to feel those emotions. I remember one moment very clearly. This was sometime after I transitioned out of the army, and my life suddenly became very quiet compared to before. I mean, for me, there was no early formations that I used to have, there was no constant schedules, there was just space to be. And I remember sitting in my apartment one afternoon. Nothing dramatic had happened that day. But in that moment, I suddenly felt this strange wave of sadness in my chest. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was noticeable. I felt it. And my first thought back then was, damn, why am I feeling this right now? My mind, my brain wanted an explanation for feeling that sadness. It wanted a reason. My brain wanted a problem to solve. But in that moment, there wasn't one. So instead of trying to fix it, I did something different. I just sat there. I remember even placing my hand lightly on my chest, and I said to myself, I'm just noticing the sensation in my chest. That's it. Nothing fancy, just noticing it, acknowledging that that sensation exists. And I stayed there for maybe a minute, about 90 seconds. And something subtle in that moment happened. The sensation did not disappear immediately. No, it softened just slightly. And in that moment, I realized something important. My body was learning something new. My body was learning that it was safe to feel without needing to run away from the feeling. That was one of my first real micro moments of safety. Now, I'll tell you this from lived experience. Micro moments of safety are very small. They're not dramatic breakthroughs. They're not life-changing insights. No, they're simple human experiences where your body realizes, okay, nothing bad is happening right now, right? I'll give you an example. You might be walking outside and maybe you notice the warmth of sunlight on your face. And for a brief moment, your shoulders suddenly relax, your breath slows. That, my friend, is a micro movement. Or maybe you hear a child laughing somewhere in the park and something inside you softens. That is an example of another micro moment. Or maybe you take a sip of your coffee in the morning and for 5 seconds, you pause and enjoy the taste of the coffee going through your throat. That too is a micro moment. Now, they seem small on the surface, but they matter more than we realize because your nervous system updates safety through experience, lived experience, not through information, not through advice, through lived moments. That's how your nervous system updates safety and trust over time. Now, here is where the inner child quietly enters the conversation. The inner child is not some mystical concept. No. The inner child is simply younger parts of your nervous system that learned certain things about the world very early on. The inner child is the part of yourself that learns what safety felt like, what feels threatening, what feels unpredictable. That's the whole concept of the inner child. And if you grew up in an environment where emotions were not welcome, your nervous system may have learned early on to hide feelings. I mean, if you grew up in an environment where things felt chaotic, your nervous system may have learned to stay alert, always watching. Your nervous system learns to always anticipate. And I'll tell you this, these patterns, they don't disappear just because we grow older. No, they stay in the body. And many times when we talk about healing the inner child, what we are actually doing is we are reintroducing safety to those old patterns. But we are doing it very slowly. We're doing it very gently. And for me, I experience this in unexpected ways. For example, something very simple like hugging a tree. I know that might sound funny, but I remember the first time I did it. You know, I was walking outside and I saw this big, beautiful tree, right? And something in me just felt curious. So I walked over, placed my hands on the tree, and I leaned against it and I gave it a big hug. And I remember laughing at myself because part of my mind, the thought that I was going through initially was, well, what are you doing? What are people going to think about me seeing me hugging a tree? But another part of me felt strangely calm hugging that tree in that moment. I mean, the texture of the bark, the stillness of the tree. I mean, that quiet moment. And for a brief second, something inside of me felt like a child again. I mean, curious, playful, unconcerned with how it looked from the outside. And that moment lasted maybe, I don't know, 10 seconds. But for me, it registered as another micro moment of safety. Another moment happened in a grocery store, and this one surprised me. I was walking down the aisle and I saw a little kid, a little child dancing to music playing in the store. Just dancing freely, like no self-consciousness, no hesitation. The child was just dancing, having a good time. And I noticed something in my chest, seeing that child dancing with no care in the world. I noticed a warmth. And also, I noticed a tiny bit of sadness because I realized something. At some point in life, many of us learn to stop doing things like that. We learn to behave, to be appropriate, to not look silly. And I have seen while those rules help society function, they sometimes disconnect us from our natural playfulness, from the inner child. That moment in the grocery store stayed with me because I realized that that child had not disappeared inside of me. It had simply gone quiet. And that child was simply waiting for safety. You see, reintroducing yourself to your inner child is not about forcing anything. No, it's about creating enough small moments of safety that curiosity begins to return. For example, maybe you try something new, not something big, something small, like taking a different walking route than you used to. Like parking your car in a different spot that you always do every time. Like brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. Now, on the surface, these tiny changes might seem insignificant, but I'm telling you, your nervous system notices them over time. It's new information, right? It's new lived experience, rather. And your nervous system begins learning the world is not completely predictable, but it's also not dangerous. This gentle novelty creates space for safety to grow. And in that space, something very interesting begins happening. Over time, playfulness starts to return, curiosity returns, and even laughter, belly laughter, returns. These are all signals that the inner child is beginning to feel safe again, right? You know, I noticed this in my own life in unexpected ways. Most times, I talk to myself while I'm taking a walk outside. Not in a stressful way, but in a very curious, getting to know myself way. Almost like two parts of me are having a conversation back and forth. One part is the adult, the responsible one, and the one thinking about life decisions. And the other part feels younger. The curious version of myself, the more playful version of myself, right? And while that is going on, asking simple questions like, why are we so serious right now? Or can we try something different today for the sake of trying something different today? Now, when I first started this very consciously a few years ago, it used to feel strange to me, but now I see it very differently. It's simply different parts of the nervous system communicating. Now, and I've also seen that the more safety those parts feel, the more those parts begin to trust each other. Now, sometimes the inner child shows up through emotions too. Now, for example, you might feel unexpected joy from something very small. I mean, something as small as watching ducks on a lake do their thing, or something as small as seeing sunlight through leaves, or hearing a familiar song. And suddenly you start to feel lighter, like a little softer. Those moments matter because they remind your nervous system in real time that life is not all about surviving. It's also about experiencing this beautiful moment. It's about feeling, it's about playing, it's about exploring, getting curious about yourself, things that children naturally know how to do. That's what life is about. Now, but I also want to say something very, very, very important here. when you first start reconnecting with the inner child, it doesn't always feel joyful at first, from my experience. Sometimes it brings up sadness. Sometimes it brings up grief because you may realize how much of yourself you had to hide growing up. You may realize how much pressure you carried. You may realize how much responsibility you took on too early as a child. And when those realizations appear, it can feel emotional. I experienced that too on my journey because those emotions are not signs of failure. No, they're signs that the nervous system finally feels safe to reveal something. And like I always say, the key is not forcing anything. We're not trying to heal faster because that never works out. We're not trying to create dramatic breakthroughs. No. What we are simply doing is noticing micro moments of safety throughout our day. Maybe a moment where your body softens, or maybe a moment where your breath deepens, or maybe where curiosity appears. Moments like that, being aware of those moments. And those moments over time slowly teach the nervous system a new message that you're safe enough to be yourself. And that message, repeated gently over time, allows the inner child to step forward again. Not all at once, but little by little. Now, if you're listening to this right now, my friend, I want you to try something simple today. I want you to notice one small moment where your body feels even slightly relaxed. Maybe it happens while you're drinking tea or sipping your coffee, maybe while you're outside taking your dog for a walk, maybe while you're listening to music. Just pause and take one breath and quietly say to yourself, this moment is safe. That's it. You don't need to do anything else. Because over time, what happens is those small moments, my friend, start to accumulate. And over time, they begin changing the way your body experiences the world. Now, reintroducing yourself to your inner child is not about going backwards. No, it's about allowing parts of you that were once hidden to feel safe enough to exist again. I mean, the playful parts of yourself, the curious parts of yourself, the imaginative parts of yourself. And sometimes those parts, they show up in the smallest ways. They show up maybe while you find yourself laughing at something silly or trying something new or simply sitting quietly with yourself without needing to fix anything. That's when that child shows up. So if today you notice even one small moment where you feel slightly more at ease, slightly more curious, slightly more open, I want you to know something, my friend. That's not a small thing. Oof, that's huge as fuck. That is your nervous system learning something new. And those moments, repeated over time, consistently, not perfectly, are how you gently find your way back to yourself. As always, I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to thank you so much for listening. And I'm sending you so much love from my heart to yours. Thank you.